cashing out last night at Peppermill for the biggest win I've had in 2020, about 3,500, a little more than that. Basically, the long and short of it was, despite really tough competition in the game, I guessed correctly when it came to should I play my hand for value straightforward or should I turn it into a bluff catcher. And the answer was the latter in two big hands that I ended up winning. I also picked up pocket aces against pocket kings, though my opponent in that hand only had about 400, so that helped as well. And certainly after 3 brutal sessions in a row about 2 weeks ago, that does not suck at all to book a win like that. So I'm heading back into Peppermill now for what will be my last session of the week, as I generally can only play 2 days a week tops these days, on Thursdays and Fridays when I'm off. But let's look to make it 2 in a row, and then, well, let's just say I'm gonna go grab some weapons later on. Stay tuned. I jump into the 3 seat of the $5 blind no limit hold'em game, and we are off and running. I pick up ace king under the gun 1 and raise to 20. Under the gun 2 and 3 both call, so with 65 in, the flop comes king 7 deuce with 2 spades, giving me top pair, top kicker. I bet 25, hoping to keep hands like pocket 8s or pocket 9s in there. Plus 2 folds and plus 3 makes the call. So with 115 in, the turn's 7 of spades, bringing in front door spades. With top pair, top kicker, and the nut flush draw, I'm obviously going to continue to bet, despite the fact that I'm in a hand against the 1 player out of 8 that I don't know how he plays. I make it 35, and he does something interesting here. He raises me to 140. Obviously, we know that he does not have the nuts here with the ace-high flush blocker, but he could certainly have a lot of other flushes, just flat calling pre from plus 3. So we elect just to call, and with 395 in, the river's another 7. I didn't think he was the type necessarily to bluff here, so I ruled out checking. I figured that if I bet small, he might find a crying call. Instead, I make the bet, and he shoves all in for 175 more. Now, most players know that making that play with a king is going to be a bit of a negative free roll here, as I'm folding a lot of the pairs below the king, and obviously I'm calling with pocket aces and all of my 7s. But that said, I still elect to make the call here. So we have a $945 pot, and he shows king 10 offsuit for a chop when he was close to drawing dead on the turn. And there's not much to say about it, but the very next hand, I picked up ace king again, raised, hit the flop, and won the hand. And I just thought I'd include this as an example of hell freezing over, of me successfully picking up ace king and hitting the flop in back-to-back hands. Next hand comes a half an hour later when we get an OMC limp, and I have ace king in the low jack. As I'm grabbing chips, the hijack throws in a $5 chip. Then I put in my raise, expecting him to still fold his hand. But since I'm mentioning this, you've probably already guessed that he didn't. The big blind in the limper call as well. So with 140 in, the flop is ace 6-3 rainbow. I just keep raising ace king and hitting it. I bet 55, and the hijack insta-raises to 255. The others fold. Now, this is a guy who I don't know well, but he's always very nice to me and had been very nice to me prior to that hand on that day. And I'm sure some of you know that the guys who are nicest to you are often the guys least likely to bluff you, unless they're an established VIP, which this guy definitely wasn't. So I actually took that into account. And I even said out loud that I figured he had ace-3 or ace-6.
I just got this feeling you have ace-6 or ace-3 on me here. So I'm going to fold.
I folded my hand, and I should have taken blockers into account because I was wrong. He showed 6-3. So we make the good lay down there, and on the next hand, we get a recreational player straddling to 10, and I have ace-queen early position, and I raise him to 60. He calls, as expected. That's why I raised so much. With 120 in, the flop comes 7-6-3, all hearts. And I check, which results in him overbet shoving all in for $220. With 2 overcards, the nut flush draw, and the knowledge that this guy bluffs a lot, I'm making the call here. The board ends up running out with no heart and no pair of any kind for me, but guess what? Ace-queen high was good enough. The next hand comes when we get an older guy who was very tough to beat and a notorious trapper, raising to 20 from the cutoff, with only me and the blind left with cards. I pick up 2 red kings on the button, and I figure I'm going to beat him in his own game, so I elect to just call here. I do this because, as I said, he is tough to get money out of, but I know that if I throw him off, it can be done, as he has respect for my play, and I figured he'd fold out most of his range out of position to my 3-bet anyway. So I think the flat call makes sense in a number of ways. The one thing that I didn't count on was the blind calling also, which he did. But either way, with 60 in, we go 3 ways to a flop of 9-4-6-2 clubs. The blind checks, and the cutoff bets out for 50 here, and I decide to slow play it again. I just call, and again, the blind surprises me by not folding. So with 210 in, the turn is the queen of hearts. The blind checks, and the cutoff bets 180 of his 270 left. I opted to not raise him all in for that last $90 here, and at the time I had a reason why, but I quickly realized that reason made no sense. So that was a mistake, but whatever. The blind finally folds. So we have a $570 pot, and the river is an offsuit jack, and he checks again. Did I think he would check aces here often? No, I didn't. But was it possible? Yes. I figured the most likely thing was that he had nothing at all here. But I could still be value owning myself a small percentage of the time. So with that in mind, I elected just to check back the river with his $90 behind, and he says ace high. So I made a mistake on the turn, but still take down a nice pot, and I'm up almost $600 early. Next hand is really interesting. It's a hand where we get a limp from a 94-year-old man under the gun 3. And by the way, this guy does not look 94 at all. I raise him to 25 in the cutoff with 8-9 of clubs. The blind makes the call, as does +3. So with 75 in, the flop is 5 of clubs, 6 of clubs, king of hearts, giving me a gut shot straight flush draw. I bet $55 here. The blind folds, and +3, this old guy, raises 100 more. I think with the straight flush draw here, I gotta make this call. So I do. With 385 in, the turn is the 3 of clubs, giving me the flush. And now, this guy bets out for 300. Now, I know this guy pretty well by now, and he does not always have to have a flush here. He could still be overplaying some hands that he raised the flop with. But that said, it's kind of hard to know exactly what to put him on here. But we do know that he's got some sort of a strong hand. after the $300 bet, he only had $275 left behind. So I decided that I was going to call, look for a blank river before fully doubling this guy up. So that's what I do. I make the call, and we go to the river with 985 in, and it comes the blank that I was hoping for, an offsuit jack. Sure enough, he bets all the rest of his money, and, as I planned, I make the call. So we have a $1,535 pot, and he shows ace-10 of clubs for the nuts. I suppose this shouldn't surprise me at all, an old guy putting in all his money with the nuts. I still don't think that he's ever really raising his flush draws on the flop all that often. I think this was the one time he's tried it, and it worked out perfectly for him. Either way, it's pretty frustrating that once again, I'm on the wrong side of a pretty big cooler, as has been happening all year long. Next hand, I pick up kings under the gun and raise to 20, plus 2 calls, as does a VIP on the button. With 65 in, it comes ace-10-3 with 2 diamonds. And being out of position, I check. Plus 2 calls, and the button bets 50. And given how he plays, I think a call is in order. Plus 2 folds, and with 165 in, the turn comes to jack of clubs. I check, and he bets 100. I think about it for a minute and call. So at 365 in, the river is a really interesting card. It comes the ace of diamonds, bringing in front door diamonds and pairing top pair, and I check. As expected, he bets. He fires 200. And as I mentioned, he's a VIP and doesn't always have to have a flush draw here. So I call, and we have a $765 pot, and he shows king-8 offsuit for a stone-cold bluff. So we take down that pot, and on the next hand, we get an under-the-gun limp, and I have pocket aces plus 3 and make it 25. We get 3 calls. So with 100 in, the flop comes ace 4-3, 2 hearts, giving me top set. I elect to slow play it here, given I knew that one of these guys was likely to bet, which sure enough, one does. He fires 75, and I smooth call, hoping to check raise and play for stacks on non-heart turns. So with 250 in, the turn is another 3, giving me aces full, and I check, but unfortunately, so does he. The river comes to 10 of hearts, and now I was unsure here. Front door hearts have come in, but thinking back on it, this should have been the spot for the check raise, given his ability to represent the flush if he doesn't have it, and the fact that he can potentially call a check raise if he does. But that said, I can't always show you what I wish I'd done on these vlogs. I can only show you what I did. I ended up betting out 200, and he snap calls with king-9 of hearts for the nut flush. So I end up on the right side of my first big cooler in quite a while, but I fail to maximize on a hand that I could have played better. And in our last hand, I pick up pocket queens, under the gun as usual, or so it always feels. I make it 20, 3 callers, including my 94-year-old nemesis. With 85 in, it comes 7-6 deuce, 2 diamonds. I bet 60, and it folds to this guy, who slides in 2 stacks of $55 each. Now at Peppermill, the rule is that is just a call. And as an aside, I know some guys do it as an angle to try and see a cheap river, knowing that it'll be ruled a call, but hoping their opponent will use that as an excuse to not bet the turn. Now, that said, I don't think that is what was happening here. I just know it's a thing. Anyway, his raise doesn't happen. So he wanted to raise, but can't. And with 205 in, the turn's another deuce, and I check. He then fires 100. Now let me ask you guys this. How many of you were ever folding queens here? I'm doubting too many of you. And, like you, I didn't fold them either. So I make the call. And it's a $405 pot, and the river's the 8 of diamonds, and it goes check, check. Now, I figured when it goes check, check, I'm going to win this pot 95% of the time, but we are playing against one of these old guys who I know all of you know, and their policy is simply to never raise pre-flop, ever. And that's one of these guys. So, I end up losing to pocket kings. 2 hands later, I had queens again, but lost to a set of 10s. Fortunately, a king-high flop allowed me to lose the minimum there. Either way, we played for a couple more hours, and I racked up and booked a nice win. All right, that is an $884 win here on a Friday night, which after last night's win, which was significantly bigger, feeling pretty good, obviously. Ran pretty good. Still kind of blown away about that hand against the 94-year-old who had the nuts there. And again, I shouldn't be surprised when I'm showing the nuts. I just didn't think he was raising flush draws hardly ever. But in that particular instance, he was. Is there any way I can get away from that? I feel like it's kind of a weird spot. I guess I could have folded it pre-flop. I guess I could have folded to the raise on the flop, even though I had a straight flush draw. I guess I could have folded the turn. And I guess I could have folded the river. Like, I could argue for all of those, but then I could argue against them all too. I'm not sure. Either way, the poker for this vlog is done. And I'm gonna go do something I've never done before. And you know what? I'm just gonna cruise down Virginia Street. I'm gonna cruise the main, as they say on hot August nights here in Reno, down to where this is. And I'll bring you along with me at double speed. Reno axe. That's where I'm at. The closest I've ever come to throwing an axe is playing Assassin's Creed 3. So I don't know how this is gonna go. All right, so my buddy Larry's here, and he's mastered this already, but I still have some work to do. What the hell? How do you make this look so easy?
Where's it at? Where's it at?
Right on the line.
You're pulling it out of the 4.
All right, so it's clear that beginner's luck is a thing in this game. I played one game, and I've got one win. Maybe I should just quit while I'm ahead. All right, so I emerged victorious in the first 2 games, and Larry got me in the last one. I gotta say, throwing axes, solid activity. I dig it. I'm definitely gonna be back. Fun place. Hang out, grab a beer, throw an axe. I like it. That'll wrap it up for us here on this edition of the vlog. Hit the like and subscribe buttons. We'll see you next time.